FBI put him into a house, safe house they paid for. They went to the parents as well, to Matt Robinson and Amber, basically said, your life's at risk. There could be somebody who jumps up and wants to avenge Charlie Kirk. And, we're going to watch you. And they went into a federal safe house. What happened next is that they started thinking that the feds were maybe gonna, maybe not as honest as they thought. And
how do you know any of that?
You gotta watch the show, right?
Yeah, no. How do you know that?
I had a source within the Robinson family.
You have a source,
yeah.
An anonymous source, of course. So there's no way for us to verify that what you're saying right now is actually even true.
Do you find it to be reliable hearsay?
No, I don't find it to be reliable at all. It's just a source.
I'm just doing what the prosecution
did. What you're doing is a cool story.
It's not cool. Well, you must have hated watching the preliminary hearing.
You're giving us a cool story. Wait, you're saying that according to your sources, that the reason that the parents haven't recanted any of this.
Recanted what? They have no statement from the parents.
Wait, I just want to make sure that if it was the case that was being reported in mainstream media, that your father came to you and said, hey, is this you? What's going on here? And then he and one of his buddies took you in where you turned yourself in. You wouldn't go out and be like, no, that's not what happened.
That isn't what happened, though. You're just wrong on this.
Okay, maybe I'm paraphrasing. What am I wrong on?
So what is your, sorry, just so I'm clear, where is your evidence that the parents turned him in?
Oh, no, I didn't say that.
You said it says in mainstream media?
I said with a sheriff friend.
Yes.
But the father did confront him.
The father confronted what?
Tyler Robinson.
And where did you learn this? That the Tyler confronted him?
Well, that's part of the official documents. Our fact checkers can pull that up. But yes.
But I'm saying, when you say official documents, do you mean you saw this on CNN or you saw this play out in the hearing?
No, this was one of the things that I went through and fact check pre-debate.
Are you talking about the charging documents?
I think it could have been in the charging documents, yeah. But we can pull them up.
No.
And yes, are you disputing this?
Do we have that in the back to pull it up?
I can already tell you what you're talking about, the charging documents. Because this is where we had to figure out where this story came from, because everyone was operating on the assumption that Matt Robinson turned him in. Until we got to the preliminary hearing and we understood, like I said, even for that, when you are charging someone, you can use hearsay. It's all probative, right?
Sure.
Nothing. So they didn't have statements. It's not like Matt Robinson, even though he was interviewed that night. Amber Robinson was interviewed that night by a Fed, separate rooms. Tyler Robinson was interviewed by a Fed. They did not produce statements saying, my son did this. I believe my son did this. But what happened was they did interviews, but also the crucial person here who you just brought up is Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell is the biggest unknown in this entire case. Everyone keeps saying they heard from Mike Mitchell this, they heard from Mike Mitchell that. So when the person wrote up the report that night, and it was Brian Davis who wrote up what became the charging document, he after they transported Tyler Robinson from the Washington Sheriff's County office up to, I think it's Salt Lake City, I think it was 4 a.m. in the morning that they got up there, he then writes the what becomes a charging document. So he's basically saying, we all spoke to a bunch of people and here's the information that we got, right? We've not seen that. So it could have come from Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell could be saying...
I don't know how this negates the point, though.
Why wouldn't the negates the point, because you don't have a statement from the parents.
Yeah,
you are going...
Why wouldn't they just correct
it's not correcting. That doesn't negate the point. The point is that we now got the preliminary hearing. If the parents were the ones who said, I'm turning my son in because he's guilty...
I didn't say they turned him in.
I think you're talking about the you said it's been the narrative, everybody's known this. The narrative initially, which I think you agree with, was that, Matt Robinson knew his kid was guilty and turned him into the police station. What actually happened in terms of Sheriff Brooksby, who was present there and gave a press conference, what happened was this Mike Mitchell character essentially peer pressured him, and we can get a fact check on this. We can find Sheriff Brooksby's press conference, and he said, they know it's you and you're going to come in peaceably, or people are going to be banging down your door. He was a undercover cop, which I don't like that. I don't know what he did undercover. It's very hard to find anything about Mike Mitchell, but he worked with them for 20 plus years, the police officers. The reason why Tyler Robinson knew him was because he lived nearby and he was also his Boy Scout leader.
How does this negate that the parents could write this second? And by the way, if you have the evidence... I'm going to address that point. I'm just saying that your first point, which is that the parents did this, yeah.
We don't know that the parents...
I didn't say that they did, ever.
Well, you're quoting the parents as having said, you said that Matt Robinson said that his kid was, did you say involved? I don't want to misquote you.
Confronted him about it.
Confronted him.
Yes.
And I'm telling you that we have not seen any evidence that is true.
We can fact check that.
Okay.
Because we do have evidence.
And I'm saying it's the charging doc, which could have been derived from a statement Mike Mitchell said.
Two things I have ready in the back. One is the charging doc, and the other one is a video of Kathy Nestor saying she hasn't seen Tyler's phone.
Okay, we can
Okay,
run
which
Kathy to
one
go
would you want
back,
to
and
see
then
first?
just to
You
go
wanna see
backwards
Kathy
to,
first?
yeah, Kathy first in court saying she didn't get her client's phone. Yeah, and then I think we'll go to the, if you're okay with that.
A thing not in dispute. These are all things that are not even disputed.
Okay, so we don't have to show it.
We never get to the thing that I am disputing.
Well, I was just providing an answer. We were coming back in from a break because you were talking about the text messages, something that you felt was concrete. So it was just my rebuttal to you that it's not concrete because they haven't had a chance to actually answer that, and she didn't even get to see your client's phone. So that's effectively, again, the state saying these messages are real. You don't get the discovery on these messages just yet. She will during trial. They will actually
Don't
discover
you
the
think
messages.
that would make their case fall apart if it was the case that they weren't able to actually pull the data off the text messages? Do you think the prosecution would go to court with fabricated text messages?
It's called winners and losers. They may not be fabricated, but by the way, as what they are saying, like I said, if there was somebody logged into his phone, they may not be fabricated. That's the point.
So let's get to the
They just could be somebody else.
The parents fact check.
Yeah, so I was saying, I believe what you're talking about was derived from the charging doc, which was signed off by Brian Davis. Let's see if that's correct. What are we looking at
Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, I'm sorry.
Can you zoom in a
Is
little
this
bit?
the charging
I
doc?
can't see it. Robinson's
yes.
father reported that when his wife showed him the surveillance image of the suspected shooter in the news, he agreed that it looked like their son. He also believed that the rifle that police suspected the shooter used matched the rifle that was given to his son as a gift. As a result, Robinson's father contacted his son and asked him to send a photo of the rifle, which makes sense with the text messages. Robinson did not respond. However, Robinson's father spoke on the phone with Robinson. Robinson implied he planned to take his own life. Robinson's parents were able to convince him to meet at their home.
Yes, so this is proving my point. This is from the charging document, correct? Yes, so what I'm saying to you is that 3 people got interviewed on that night. Mike Mitchell got interviewed, Amber Robinson got interviewed, and Matt Robinson got interviewed. Of the 3 of them, only one of them actually wrote a statement, which was referred to in this preliminary trial. He came in, I believe, in March, Mike Mitchell, and he wrote a statement, which I find to be very shady that they decided to bring.
But why aren't the parents disputing that?
No. Well, first off,
that's the question.
The parents are not going to ever play in court, play to the cameras in court when they have a legal team that to be advising them not to speak to the court because your son could go to prison
but
forever.
They're playing to somebody else who's your source?
I'm not going to address that.
They're playing to someone else who's your source but won't go publicly tell the media this is not true?
Well, what I did not say to you that I just said I have a source, so I want to be very clear and take it from somebody who was involved and permanently sued. When I have to take my lawyer's advice, and there's so many things that I want to respond to when people are speaking about.
Yeah, but it's bizarre that they would utilize a source which would get the information to you, but wouldn't just go to the media and be like, actually, that's all wrong.
I am telling you that if you would nary find a lawyer who would advise you to go to the media.
This
mother, especially when your son was up for death.
If I thought that my kid was in any way, shape, or form going to be, you couldn't shut me up.
What?
Or my wife, she would be like, that's not true. That's ridiculous. There's no possible, that never happened. These people are lying through their teeth. They'd be public whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that's for you and your wife, but when a judge issues a gag order in a case and your son is up for death, and your lawyers could be advising you, but if you say anything, you could blow the case. You would have a more responsible consideration.
I see.
And we're speaking opinion here. You're like, well, I wouldn't care. I'd violate it, and I'd violate the judge's orders and see what happens.
You have a source to see if they're violating it with them?
I'm not speaking to a source, but what I'm saying to you is speaking just relevant to what this is. We have not seen any proof that statement that is included in this charging document. I think it is highly likely on the basis of the preliminary hearing that all came from Mike Mitchell. And Mike Mitchell would be a part, he's
based
saying,
on the statements of
it's him saying, the parents told me this, the parents could dispute that. That's going to come down the line, right? They're going to be able to seat the parents. I will say this, putting together context clues, if the state had it on, 100% certainty that Matt Robinson and Amber Robinson said it, a 5-day preliminary hearing would be a good time to say we have enough evidence, and I can tell you why Matt Robinson made this statement, and here is his statement that he signed. That would have been a good time to present that evidence.
That would also be a good time for the defense to say that's just totally fabricated.
No, it's not. It's the wrong time.
Why couldn't they?
That is completely the wrong time.
Why couldn't they?
Because what they're doing is they already said they didn't receive discovery. They literally can't. They literally can't because they can't. They did not receive discovery.
You're saying that they didn't receive that information?
No, they just received the text messages. But in order to...
That's not the text messages.
The probative information.
Yeah, we're talking about the information that we just reviewed. That's not the text messages.
They never presented the state never put it on.
Yeah, they didn't. The defense could easily still have presented this. Yeah.
No.
They could have said they're
No.
No.
You're
no, they're not allowed to. Are
no,
you sure?
in a preliminary hearing,
Yeah.
the defense is engaging with whatever evidence the state decides to put on.
Uh-huh.
They did not put this on as evidence. Brian Davis was up there.
So they're not allowed to present anything?
They're responding to the state's
I'm asking,
evidence.
are they allowed to present anything?
They are allowed to say.
Like if there was a conspiracy that they could prove right then and there, would they present that in one of these hearings?
No, it wouldn't be the right time for
I
that.
disagree. I think
It's
that
not disagreement.
that they not only could do it, but they would do it. In fact, when I talked in depth with my attorney, he said that's exactly, if you had actual evidence that there was fabrications by the feds, that's exactly when you would introduce that.
So when in the document that they filed yesterday or a couple of days ago, the appropriate, like what you're doing at this stage of the hearing is the state is saying we have enough evidence that we think this needs to go forward for the trial. Hence the reason that there's this extraordinary, we allow hearsay because it doesn't really need to be perfect. It can be enough that we feel like we can move forward, right? And okay, I disagree with that in general when somebody's rotting in prison, but whatever. The next phase is for them to meet in court and for the defense to essentially present an argument to the state that says, we find this filing to be defective in and of itself. We don't even have to defend ourselves because you, the state, have enough, the laws are on the books, and this filing is defective, and you should get rid of these charges because they don't make sense based on what you can decide based on a law on the books. So that's why they then filed the dismissal. Right? So in the dismissal, what they're doing is they are engaging, and this is what was widely misinterpreted.
Well, yeah, they're engaging as though, as it's a hypothetical. If this is hypothetically true, then
so they're saying all of these
but
charges.
I'm not disputing any of that.
So that's what you're asking. Why you're saying could they just
what
put
I'm
on?
asking specifically is like, who could shut parents up who are like, no way, there's no possible, this never happened, this is ridiculous. They would be shouting it on CNN. They would be shouting it from the rooftops. They would be losing their minds, and you're like, no. To keep quiet, not enough to talk to your source, but enough to keep them quiet. I think it's quite ridiculous. But I'll leave this whole point. Let's just say maybe it was misconstrued, right? If there's a little bit of reason to doubt it because we're still waiting for the evidence for trial. If that's the case, then why not take the same standard for the evidence that you present? You're just waiting for trial.
Well, you didn't do that.
Wait a second.
We're here.
Wait a second. I just want to make sure that I got this right. That's your argument to me, right?
My argument to you is what?
Your argument to me is that, hey, wait a second, Andrew. There's not enough here that convinces me, right?
Well, that's actually my rebuttal to you, is that you are saying, why are people engaging in what you term to be conspiracy theories?
No.
I term it to be thinking. They're just thinking because they're recognizing there are a lot of holes in these stories and that this is not strong evidence, right? This is the reason they're doing it. I'm explaining to you, this is the reason that they're doing it. I'm addressing what you view to be overwhelming evidence. And by the way, I want to be clear.
That which convinces me.
But thus far, every point that you've brought up, every point that you've brought up, did you feel like this is beyond a reasonable doubt? I mean, you realize
remember what I said in my opening.
Going to be.
It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just what I find convincing is what I find overwhelming.
So why are you so upset when people say they don't find it convincing?
If that was the limitation of the claims that you made, if it was just, wait a second, there's a little bit of problems, there's some problems in this case that I have questions for that I want answers to, nobody would have a problem, actually. Least of all me. I would be the least likely person to have an issue with you, any of your fans, anybody saying. In fact, I've had tons of Discord calls about this. My position's always been clear. Of course conspiracies exist. Some of them have way better evidence than others. But I've seen them myself. I know conspiracy. In fact, the federal government has hundreds of thousands of laws about conspiracies. They see them everywhere. We both know this, right? That's never what the problem is. The problem is when you make claims outside of, well, wait a second. I'm just questioning evidence here. I'm just questioning what the state's case is here. I'm just asking questions. It's when you make claims outside of that, where you claim that there's good evidence or good standards, you should believe because, and then it turns out that it's all nonsense, or it's wackadoo stuff, or it makes no sense. And when we have a chance to cross-examine your evidence that you presented, I'm going to show a lot of that. A lot of this conjecture that's based on literally nothing, that leads from no inferences whatsoever. Like, you couldn't even infer it logically. That's the problem. The problem has never been whether or not you just said, you know, there's not enough in this case so far until we get to the trial. I remain unconvinced. I'm sure there's tons of people who remain unconvinced yet until we get to the trial. I think that's fine. I think it's fine. There's people who are convinced too. That's never been my problem. My problem is the claims which are external to that.
Okay. I'm not sure I really care if you have a problem with what I think in my own spare time. I don't understand this like lecture that you just gave. But beyond that, what I'm saying is that
What
the
lecture?
state is allowed to use.
I didn't
This is
lecture
what
you.
my problem is. You guys are not like, yeah, you guys think while it's still legal. You can. You are allowed to do that. So, but anyway,
Nobody said you can't.
going back to you saying I wouldn't have a problem. I think I just demonstrated pretty thoroughly that what you claim that you have a problem with is exactly what the state's engaged in at this stage. So it just doesn't make sense.
That's not the case. In fact,
So
the
if people
thing
look
is,
and they say,
the thing
I'm
is
looking at
funny.
the gun and I see, and I'm inferring this, and someone else says, I'm looking at the gun evidence and I'm inferring that, they're both doing the exact same thing.
They're not.
You're just saying, I want to do it for the state.
That's propositionally false.
That is not
I'll
propositionally
explain
false.
exactly how. It is the case that every proposition is going to have a true or false conclusion, period. That's just logic, right? It's the law of excluded middle. All propositions are going to be true or they're going to be false. When we get into when we're making inferences based on propositions. We can actually come to true conclusions with false premises inside of a proposition, in fact. What we're talking about here is not whether or not you feel that you're convinced by this evidence.
But you felt like you were convinced.
Right, sure. But here's the thing. When you ask me my reason, Andrew, why are you convinced by this? I can give you my reasons why I'm convinced by it, why it seems reasonable and rational to me to be convinced. You could even say, but Andrew, I'm just not convinced by it. If that was the limitation of your claims, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. That's why I wanted to have the conversation, in fact, was so that we could move into your actual claims that you've made, which transcend the idea of I'm just asking questions.
Before we get into that, your team has one thing they want to show before you go into that.
Okay.
So if you want to pull that up, this is the prosecution filing showing defense had full discovery by April 1st.
Ooh.
They did not. That's not true.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
To date, the state's prosecutors have disclosed all evidence that is presently and reasonably available to them as required under Rule 16 Utah R Criminal, to be more precise, as of April 1st.
Yeah, that was not 100%. That's why they're caging that by saying what's reasonable. There was an entire, and we can pull this up. Like, we should now play the Kathy Nestor clip because that's from there. So, and they were basically saying you don't need it at this stage, meaning it's not reasonable that you're asking for this when we're going into a hearing that's just going to be based on hearsay and stuff, things of that nature. But of course, by the time the trial comes, you're going to get all of the discovery
Where's the show
documents.
cause?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, so that's
I'm even fine with
yeah,
it.
that we all know. And then, by the way, just now that the hearing is over, and you can also fact check this, they now at the end of the preliminary hearing dropped like an insane amount of the discovery stuff they gave to them like the week after. You guys can give me the exact amount. I don't want to say because I don't know my I don't remember how much it was. It was an absurd amount of stuff that they gave to them right after the preliminary hearing that they had been asking for. Because that was one of the things that I kept saying on my show is as we were watching that preliminary of the preliminary, why not just give them the stuff now so they can engage in these arguments? Because I feel like you, it's like, I want to hear what they have to say about the text messages. Why can't you just give them what they're asking for so that they can actually engage you? And it didn't happen. So, but the judge ruled that it wasn't necessary at this stage. And that was the whole point of that
Because it's a show
preliminary to the
cause.
preliminary. Yeah.
Would you like to play the Kathy video?
Well, he's saying he's not disagreeing, so I don't think we need
There's
to.
there's no
Okay.
disagreement
Yeah, right.
that she said that.
Yeah.
So so I guess
Yeah.
the
I'd like to
disagreements
also-
now would move into the evidences that you have stated
Yeah.
on the record, which transcend elements of reason.
Why are we
in regards
having
to this
a
case.
transcendental conversation now? Because I mean,
Because
first,
they're all
because
related to
your
this case.
entire thing was about looking at the evidence, which never made sense to me. Again, because all of the evidence that you felt to be overwhelming was hearsay. That was bizarre to me.
You told me that I could take as much time as I
No,
wanted
you
to
can.
question you on
No,
these
but
things.
I'm just asking you just to lay the groundwork of what you're saying is
Because you
problematic,
made
that
many,
you
many
decide that it trips
claims.
into
I'll
something
explain.
else. And I do still want to hold you for going through, because we discussed the gun, we discussed your,
And you can hold me to those things, but I would
yeah.
like to get into the
and we
things
should
you
discuss the
said.
screwdriver.
So, and I'll explain exactly what the groundwork is.
Mhm.
When you make claims which pass the idea of just asking questions because the state's evidence is not convincing, I think you have to answer for those claims because they are in regards to this case. You're saying, I have a claim in regards to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which is what we're talking about, not just the case of Charlie Kirk, his assassination. You should have to answer for the claims that you've made in regards to the assassination itself. You should, yeah, agreed. So if that's the case, then I would like to finally dive into some of that evidence and dive into it.
Well, just to be clear,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to have you talk about, like I said publicly, you want to engage in some conspiracies, but I said I want to make sure that we get to the substance of our debate. The substance of our debate
This is the major
is me
substance.
demonstrating that all of the quote unquote evidence that you feel that you have, which demonstrates that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk.
You don't find convincing, I get it.
It's been validated by the testimony that we saw, and in your answer for when I explained to you that he had the most degraded prints was, I don't know. Okay, well there lies my ability to process that.
It's just fine for you to not be convinced up to this point. All of your viewers, everybody watching,
you're conceding.
Nobody's giving a dispute that if all your claims ever were just up to now, the evidence that the state's given, I'm just kind of not convinced. That is not what's been happening. What's actually been happening is that you've made tons of claims in regards to this case and in regards to the Kirk assassination, which are far above and beyond, I just doubt, the state's theory.
Okay, yeah, I mean, sure.
I do doubt
the state's theory. I also am welcome to say what I think. If you want to move into opinions, if you want to talk about Erica Kirk, if you want to talk about Turning Point USA,
I'd like to talk about all
and get into it, I'm totally happy to do that. But I just want to say that, I do not feel, because I've said what's important to me is that we exhaust this topic first of our actual debate claims. I do not feel that you sufficiently have argued that the evidence is overwhelming.
I'm sorry.
Question for you.
Tyler
But I
Robinson.
am sorry you feel that way.
Candace, one question. What evidence do you need to see for you to say Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk?
That's a great question. So I actually expected in this preliminary hearing, the inverse of what he was saying is true, right? So this is now the time the state is putting on their evidence. That's the purpose of this hearing, right? The state is using hearsay, but they're also putting on their evidence. So I was just expecting some sort of a slam dunk. Like, we got him on camera taking the shot. At least we have him clear on camera. You're telling me this guy drove 13 hours all around. Like, we can definitely show you a picture that it's going to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Before we even get to the trial, people are going to see and go, oh crap, like it was really Tyler Robinson. I was expecting to at least see evidence that, because I had reported early on that the source was saying that Tyler did not step foot on campus that day. It is my perspective that he had something to do with something. I do believe he was disposing clothes at this stage, at this phase. I do believe he was disposing clothes. He was somehow, I find Lance to be more suspicious, if I'm being honest with you. And also, like I said, the use immunity that was given to Lance by the feds, the fact that the feds didn't ask him any questions, the fact that I spoke with Lance Twiggs' family, and they were like, it's very weird that the feds are not asking him more questions. He's exactly the person that I would imagine to be involved in some stuff. Allegedly, I'll say allegedly. But when we got to the preliminary hearing, there was not a single piece of evidence that I felt was slam dunk. I was waiting for that photo. I mean, anything would have made me go, all right, I think this could be the guy. If they had handed over the text messages, since that was their we got the text messages, that would be the first thing that I would hand over. But actually, who was holding them up, like I said, it wasn't the prosecution. They're right to say we were handing things over, and we heard the defense argue on behalf of the prosecution, saying it's not them and it's not the FBI, it's the FBI that's holding on to things. Is the FBI took everything. The FBI took the gun, the FBI took initially the screwdriver, and then when I heard testimony about the things that they didn't, that they found that were suspicious, example being the backpack, that's something that really bothers me, that they say they traced the shooter, they traced the route that he went on, and then there was an abandoned, we know, it looks like he's wearing some sort of a backpack. We know that there was an abandoned backpack found at the bus stop in front of a library, and they felt that it should be taken into evidence. They took it. The FBI, this was the testimony of Amanda Baker, I believe her last name is, but you might want to fact check that because I think I'm blending last names. She was the forensics for the FBI. And then she says she gets a call on the 13th and they stop testing on this backpack because they find that the backpack actually belongs to somebody on Charlie's team. But if you know the map, the layout of the campus, you're going, Well, what the hell are they doing all the way up? This is nowhere near anywhere. And by the way, that's not an acceptable answer for why you just gave it back. That's not, that's like, why would you give it back? You're acting like no one's ever been killed by somebody on their team before, right? So I found that to be very strange that it was on the exact route that the alleged gunman ran, and that their excuse was, we just gave it back because we heard that this belonged to somebody on Charlie's team. So that to me is, this is why the investigation itself feels underwhelming. When you learn, and this is completely crazy to me, that some of the artifacts that Charlie was wearing were immediately returned to Erica. That's absurd. That is everything should be that the car that they carried Charlie in to go to the hospital, they had immediately towed, cleaned, and back up for resale. That's absurd. That should be sitting in evidence. And any police officer that you speak to will say, or a person that's been involved in a crime will say, I didn't get my stuff back for years. It had nothing to do with anything. It was just around. And they kept it into evidence until the trial was over, and it has to be approved. I think somebody said by the attorney general has to sign off on giving you those objects back. And we were told this is all fine. And we see, this is just one example, Erica holding the crucifix. That should be evidence. Irrespective of if you feel bad for her, I think she should have it. It's sweet. That should be in evidence. Immediately paving over the crime scene. This is like the craziest thing ever. This like defies common sense. You immediately, and when you heard the guy who did it actually go up on a podcast and explain, I got the call. They said it was a paver emergency. And I've never in my entire career heard of a paver emergency. They had already had someone come up and dig up the dirt. So by the time he got there on Sunday, the dirt had already been dug up for him to lay down pavers. That is what people are looking at and going, this is weird. There needs to be answers for why this was done. And he tells us the call came from the feds and the governor's office. UVU's washed their hands of it. And what he's saying sounds true, because we heard during the testimony, one person described the regions of who was in control of everything. The feds were in control of the courtyard. So in order for anybody to have paved anything, that was federal territory, so to speak. I'm maybe not using that in the best cop term, but the feds were in control of the courtyard. So these are things that I think should be answered for. Why are we doing things differently than you would in any other criminal scenario of keeping the evidence until we know more, until we're confident? The various decoys. I did it. It just doesn't look right.
Okay, so go back to the question. So what would you need to see for you to say?
Something, if they had, I was expecting, here we have him, he took the shot, here it is. And then I'd be like, great, a clear image of him on the staircase where I'm like, that's definitively Tyler Robinson and he was on campus. We got nothing. We got literally nothing but hearsay of people saying.
But you basically get no case.
What?
You basically no case on planet Earth. You get the,
sure.
Oh, we got a picture.
Okay,
Here's him with the murder weapon. Right. Here's him taking the shot.
Most of this doesn't take place on a college campus that has surveillance everywhere.
Yeah,
One clear image of his.
But I don't understand when you're asked,
plates,
if you're asked the question, what would it take to convince? It'd be the same question be asked to me, Andrew. What would it take to convince you that the oppositional is true, right? That he's Apache or something like that. Just good, clear, concise evidence that's been presented, right, and is being presented that I can go through and link all to. Here's actually some clear picture of there being a patsy. That's what it would take for me.
Okay.
Just
I don't disagree with that. We haven't heard the defense
Just
respond.
a good evidentiary standard, and then of course I would change my mind.
So just to qualify this, so there is a possibility in the next few months that you may come out and say, guys, it's done. Tyler killed them. Yeah. So you're saying yes to that.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for the audience here to from
without question.
For you, is there anything that you could see for you to say, yeah, this guy was a patsy?
Of course, I'm going to always follow evidence.
Perfect.
So my whole thing is just this. It's really important too. I don't mind people being truth seekers and justice searchers, and the internet has helped solve tons of crimes. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, right? However, there's also people who, they not only don't solve crimes, but they just come up with conjecture, and they what's called flooding the zone. You flood the zone with tons and tons of conspiracy-based ideas, and they go nowhere, right? And in fact, they actually take away from legitimate investigation. Now, I'm not even saying anybody here is purposely flooding the zone. That's not even the claim. All I'm saying is that the claims made absent, this is just me not being convinced by the state's evidence, those become claims, and claims have to be defended. Just like mine have to be defended, yours have to be defended. And that's what we're going to get to now, yeah?
I'm going to get into it. Would you guys like to take an ad break?
Let's take an
Before we come
ad
back?
break.
And then we'll talk Erica Kirk and TPUSA.
And the conspiracies that have been conjectured by Candace Owens in regards to this case in the Charlie Kirk
Perfect.
assassination.
Folks, we'll take a 3.5 minute break and we'll be back soon.
All right, where we at?
Out there, at the end.
Just want to say shout out to the Danksters, everybody. Loving the chat. Got almost 100 super chats on our side. Thank you to everybody. We're going to read them here. I don't know what triggers planning. I think at the end probably, or maybe during breaks, longer during the mid-break. Do we have a plan for that? What do you think?
We'll figure it out. We don't have to have a plan right. I mean, it's the same way we always do it. We can do some right now, but I think most people would rather talk about this.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we typically cover at the end as many as we can. And
Imaginez ma réaction quand j'ai vu que les mecs qui faisaient 60 millions d'euros en e-com à seulement 24 ans, des fois
à la personne dans le parking. Donc les gens qui poussent le récit fédéral ne sont pas contents. Ils se demandent pourquoi a-t-elle fait ça. Ce genre d'individus, je dirais, sont ce que mon mari décrirait.